Former limited and constructed Magic player, I was talked into playing some Commander by a group of friends across a variety of states and different LGSs that I had played at in my several years, now bordering on decades of playing. And as that happened, I noticed a lot of very similar trends. The players there would not like when I brought over a lot of my collection or my expensive cards, despite them having their own expensive and pricey cards. They would not like it if we went the opposite way, and I decided to use proxies, even though they were proxying cards as well. They would not like if I was playing with a budget while they were playing with a similar budget. All of these things I think were brought on by the competitive nature that I had brought with me from my other arenas and my emphasis that I had brought in Magic the Gathering. So all of that culminated in me getting really tired of what I saw as a series of excuses. And this wasn't just one Commander play group, this wasn't one particular store, it wasn't a group of stores in a single state. Rather, as I traveled the country, this was an experience I was having over and over and over again as I was going around and playing in just local game stores, places where Rule Zero typically didn't hold sway because these were paid events or people were paying for the store for the time to be there, or potentially there were packs or some other commodities on the line, all of which required using a formalized rule set, was not played around a kitchen table. And so the option of finding my own personal group didn't really appeal to me, and it wasn't really possible given the nature of how often I traveled around. And so I came upon a decision. I would be tired of this. I would no longer want to play a very expensive game of Commander. I would no longer play proxy, where everyone's ability to simply have a printer pay for printout and use their own sense and ability, or even comb through good deck lists and have their own judgment, would be at stake. No, I would have a different solution. What I did one day, as I came to this realization, is I gathered up a huge amount of fury and spent 10 hours going through the bulk box of my local game store. We're talking commons, uncommons, and the few scant rares that had somehow gone in there that were 25 cents each. And for the grand total of $35, I just pulled out a Glissa Sunslayer from my collection. Not a very high-powered commander, not one I've even seen be built to what I would consider an 8 out of 10, just under EDH power level. No, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to put myself to the test here. Using only the things I can find in this bulk box, I'm going to make a commander deck, and I'm happy to say that I was able to do that for what is now currently $42, but is $35 if you don't count Glissa itself, and was $35 when I put the deck together. I was able to make a budget commander deck. Now, rather than listen to me rant about it, I have nothing to show you on the screen. On the time of creating this, I decided to go ahead and make a deck profile. So what I'm going to be doing in this video is going over this, the things that I liked about it, the things I disliked about it. And if you're a more experienced player, maybe some of these will come off and you'll think, wow, I really am pro proxy. This guy went through shit for no reason. And if you don't think that that's reasonable, or maybe you're a less experienced player, not that only less experienced players can disagree with that statement, by the way, you might come away thinking, huh, this looks like it's a deck I can build on a budget. And maybe if you're more the teacher role, like David Serlin says in Playing to Win, how there are people who become the slaughterer, the really strong competitive player, but then there are also the teachers, the ones who go back and help everybody else understand what they're missing, what they're lacking, and help them grow at the cost of their own continued personal growth. Then maybe you want to pick up a deck like this and see if you can't teach all of the people you play Commander with that there's more to the game than just actually building a scaffold, a Rube Goldberg machine, an endless value nest that just generates and generates and generates, but doesn't combo, but simply towers on high until it falls over like a Jenga tower, crushing everybody underneath of them. And so that's all you're going to get to see of my face for a little while, unless we have any questions at the end of this video, as I am just going to go ahead and read you the deck primer for those of you who may join later or who are interested when this gets ported to YouTube. Hi, YouTube. Here's in the stream right now. You can see that link. It will be in the description box below as well, but that's for anyone who's going to be here live. So without any further ado, I'm going to swap over, open up the next screen, and we're going to go over my, at the time, $35, now $42 Glissa Sunslayer budget commander deck. And this is all about, as you can see from the theme of the video, teaching commander players interaction with budget Glissa. I hope you enjoy. Glissa Sunslayer, 1 black green for a 3/3. Whenever Glissa Sunslayer deals combat damage to a player, choose one. You may draw a card, and you lose 1 life. Destroy target enchantment. Remove up to 3 counters from target permanent. Introduction. Budget Glissa is a list I made after multiple tables expressed their dissatisfaction in playing against expensive cards and proxies despite having their own. I decided to make a point. All of these cards, sans Glissa, were found in the bulk rare, uncommon, common pile of my local game store. For the low price of $35 at the time of creation, this list punishes poor deck construction and play patterns by attacking the weaknesses more casual Commander players bring to the table: fragile game plans, low interaction, and poor threat assessment. Who should play this? Budget Glissa is the deck for you if any of the following apply. You are looking to bring an interactive deck to a budget environment, are getting into Commander and want a low-cost entry to the format without necessarily buying a pre-arranged deck, are an experienced MTG or Commander player and want to test your limits, want to make a pod of roughly $35 Commanders because you watched a good YouTube channel, Salubrious Snail, and thought that sounded pretty cool. Or you want your pod to learn the benefits of running more removal, redundancy, or protection themselves. Strengths and weaknesses. Strengths. Combat control. Glissa reigns supreme in creature combat and has repeatable abilities to destroy the enchantments, planeswalkers, and counter generators that would normally bury a budget list under value. All that glitters. Rhystic Study. Valakut Awakening. Enemy planeswalkers and many more fall under her beatdown. Unprepared players will hold back for fear of destruction. Beatdown. Glissa dictates the pace of the game from the second she lands on the field. The breadth and low CMC nature of interaction allows surgical removal of unprotected threats or combo pieces your opponents play, letting the 3+ Commander damage add up over the turns. Offbeat picks like Tailswipe and Titanic Brawl, combined with inexpensive EDH staples like Nature's Claim and Abrupt Decay, to great effect here. Unusual tactics. To quote an opponent during an FNM this list won, First Strike, Death Touch, and Trample are an insane group of keywords. The combination of high removal, nodal benefits from combat damage, and cards associated with limited shaft lead to a higher cognitive load for opponents. What mode will you choose? What's in your hand? How do they remove Glissa? Weaknesses. Minimal resets. Glissa is a tactician's deck, and that means she struggles with when a strategic board wipe is needed. Opponents whose boards outpace her combat control, such as Omnath, Locus of Rage, Lathril, Blade of the Elves, or even Edgar Markov, must be focused and their life lowered so that other players can remove them once the threat grows beyond control. Budget. This deck isn't stopping a Thassa's Oracle or erasing a Zada Hedron Grinder, and it struggles to climb back under a Grand Arbiter Augustine IV. Glissa may be able to fight those opponents, but not with this list, or with a $35 budget. Note that these lists are not covered under the who should play this section for precisely this reason. My experience is that player skills start struggling to cover the gaps in average card quality around the $500 to $750 mark. I would add as a personal note that anyone who has CDH experience and is using that to make a budget version of a CDH deck will find themselves able to contend with this a bit more easily. Decks including a $50 Gitrog would find themselves more than capable of matching the power that this presents. Game knowledge. A Nethroi Apex of Death pilot sat down and dropped a Devoted Druid on turn 3 after missing their land drop. I immediately swung into them, then dropped removal to kill it. He said after the game he did have a swift reconfiguration in his deck, aka infinite mana when paired with the Devoted Druid. In an FNM Finals, I held Prize Fight for 4 turns after an Alayla Artful Provocateur dropped a Pilipala, while I waited for a Grand Architect or worse to appear. The low power and surgical precision of this deck means you will eat a lot of controllable losses if you don't recognize combo pieces for what they are. The game plan. After ensuring you're in the right environment or power level, which in addition to the items outlined here, I would suggest as more casual tables or more casual FNMs, the most important skill for playing Glissa is recognizing which decks in your pod have the greatest resistance to your game plan. Be prepared to be heartless. This deck is outmatched and outpriced at even the most casual tables. Play to your outs. For instance, as an aside, this means that even if it does seem that it would be rude or against the social viability of the experience, you should target the largest threat to your game plan repeatedly, even if that is deemed unfair or unreasonable to the other people at the table. This is the emphasis of being heartless. Focus target number 1, the Legion of Doom. Not coincidentally, the most common style of Commander gameplay, any deck that spirals into a massive creature-focused board state is enemy number 1. They can be Gruul Plus piles such as Rin Seri, Inseparable, or classics like Krenko, Mob Boss. Focusing them won't put them down, it only delays the inevitable. Your game plan for these board state monsters is to remove their commander and attack into them. The lower their life, the more able another player is to deal the finishing blow. Be grateful for any free creatures they put in front of Glissa to defend. Know your outs. Hard-casting Deathbringer Regent, when they've overextended, will blow these decks out on the spot, whereas Ophiomancer's Snakes make it hard for their creatures without great keywords. The presence of Finn, the Fangbearer, or Vraska, the Unseen, compels overextensions. Setting up a Namada, Primal Warden, or a Grim Haruspex lets you hang out after the board wipe these decks attract, as does Supernatural Stamina. As for Glissa modes, always choose to draw cards. You'll need them for focus target number 2, the Rube Goldberg Accident. Often heralded by a Simic commander and running an effect that makes you scratch your head, this style deck has more pop-off ability than the average pilot appreciates. Whether it's the Yarok the Desecrated, who dropped a Micaeus the Unhallowed, the Orexmithy's Slumbering Isle, whose deck contains a Nexus of Fate, or the River Song with the Tomb Trawler who has yet to draw their extra turn spell. These decks will pop off to the excitement and surprise not only of the table but even their own pilots. They might not know what their decks can do, but you should suspect. This is where game knowledge will be tested the most. Removing the commander may not work due to the bevy of 3+ card combos these piles find themselves assembling, but it's a safe bet if you've the open mana. Recognizing the combo pieces and save interaction in anticipation of their fruition. In the meantime, don't trust any of the curious enchantments or random counters these decks tend to accrue. Blow them up with Glissa. And if there's a Stacks player in the pod, get comfy with them as they'll help you keep these players under control. Nekusar the Mindrazor and Lavinia Azorius Renegade are great partners. The Legion of Doom, the first pile, also the Gruul pile that grows and grows, also recognizes these as existential threats. A pile of creatures means nothing to infinite turns and infinite value, and the Legion of Doom will be chipping in for damage as well. While you'll have an easier time for most of the game against these decks than the Legion of Doom, they've got a greater chance of winning against you outright. The biggest reason is that while the Legion of Doom has more creatures that you're capable of blowing aside, turning asunder, tail swiping, and otherwise dealing with, these kind of Rube Goldberg accidents by nature of the high game knowledge required, and the fact that they can just assemble a win through cards the owner doesn't even suspect, means that it's very possible that the surgical precision that you need to eliminate them won't be available on any random encounter that they get to generate infinite value. And focus target number 3, the Architect. Whether it's classic controls such as Aloro, Ageless Ascetic, Alayla, Artful Provocateur, and the lowest powered forms of Urza, High Lord Artificer, or the Reanimator decks of things such as Marin of Clan Nel Toth and Muldrotha the Gravetide. These decks will struggle to have any impact early and lean on a small number of efficient creatures, board wipes, and effects to push for a win. The small number of creatures and susceptibility to Glissa's effects makes them great partners and 1v1 victims towards the round's end. While Glissa annoys them, the Legion of Doom and the Rube Goldberg machine are more threatening. The Rube Goldberg machine is their natural enemy in the space and the ones they'll fight the most directly. A combo win is a win, after all, and creatures are a board wipe away. Unless they present a combo piece or an insane value engine, such as Unwinding Clock or Consecrated Sphinx, limit your interactions and start swinging their way once players are starting to drop. Your win condition against them is finishing off their weakened life or commander through cards such as Tyvar's Stand. Players who choose to be the architect are the natural predator of casual commander pods, as in nature the prey know this and band together to chip them down. Glissa benefits from effects such as propaganda, Howling Mind from Nekusar players, and any Wrath of God effects that keep the Legion of Doom under control. Focus target number 4, the odds and ends. Group Slug, Voltron, Stacks, and everything else not covered above falls here. The most dangerous thing you can do is mislabel as a commander as odds and ends when it belongs higher up on the priority list, such as the Legion of Doom, the Rube Goldberg Machine, or the Architect. But your second greatest error would be to assume they lack any win con or strengths of their own. These lists are priority number 4 because they're picked apart by your game plan natively or don't represent a significant threat to your own, but you still have to play ball. For instance, you still have to kill the Voltron commanders, whether they look like Feather the Redeemed, Sram Senior Edificer, or Siona Captain of the Pyleus. Pyleus. The extra card draw from Quain Iterant Meddler will be appreciated until you're staring down a leveler. A $50 version of the Get Rock monster will still have Dakmore salvage, etc., etc., etc. Your tools. Now that you know your have your table prioritization down, what does the deck have to help you win? In short, damage enablers, protection, precise removal, fast mana, and card draw. This guide will cover the Glissa specific choices before going into general good stuff cards. As an addendum not included in this, what I'm reading from my basic script in the write-up, something you'll note here is that I want to reiterate a lot of the items that are in this deck were pulled, in fact all of them were pulled, from the common, uncommon, and whatever happenstance misplaced rare pile my local game store owned. We'll get to this in the end, but this is not the strongest list I could make for this dollar value. It's literally what was in the boxes in front of me, and as strong as I could perceive I could make the deck given those constraints. Damage enablers: Titanoth Rex, Master Symmetrist, Thieves' Tools, and Karazdo Guildmage will be our exemplars. Glissa's First Strike plus Death Touch combination is a combat winner with one clear weakness. What if your opponent chumps with 1/1s or a low-value creature on a mid-sized board? Missing out on player combat damage prevents us from gaining access to enchantment removal, card draw, and commander damage, and to fix that, damage enablers were added. While Rogue's Passage and Thieves' Tools let Glissa swing in the clear, adding Trample also curtails the opponent's options. Cards like Karazda Guildmage threaten nasty conditional keywords that make blocking really difficult for decks like casual favorites such as Krenko Mod Boss, Arcades the Strategist, and Kaikar Wind's Fury. Part of what makes Hunter's Talent one of the deck's best cards is that in addition to granting the condition of trample on level 2, it doesn't fight but deals damage with our Death Touch creature as its blade. And cycling Titanoth Rex as a combat trick will also leave players shaking their heads. For any newer players, a quick explanation is in order. Any creature with trample deals damage to an opponent in excess of what was required to win the combat. Since Glissa has Death Touch, 1 damage from Glissa is enough to win a combat and leaves the remaining 2 points of power left over for trample damage. This means that any opponent who wants to fully block a Glissa who has trample, in addition to its normal keywords of First Strike and Death Touch, in order to prevent Glissa with those 3 keywords from getting combat damage done, the opponent must put 3 creatures in front to block. Glissa then assigns 1 damage to each blocking creature, killing them with First Strike and Death Touch during First Strike damage. This interaction puts Glissa's combat abilities on steroids, making her unblockable for all but the most committed. During one FNM, not the one that I mentioned previously that I had won, I swung and watched an opponent put 3 creatures in front of Glissa, who was at a 3/3, only for a Snakeskin Veil to blow them out and get a modal effect in addition to commander damage. Protection. Part of the reason you're playing budget Glissa, by the way, the top part here, I just want to say, the reason you have damage enablers is that it gets around one of the weaknesses that Glissa has, which is just getting chumped repeatedly, but that's not enough for this to actually be a deck that teaches the table more about what they should be playing. Protection. Part of the reason you're playing budget Glissa is to teach your pod they should be running more removal. For instance, one of the proudest moments that I had of my local game store, or one of them, was when I played enough of this Glissa that I saw a player who proudly and gleefully told me that they had put not only a Braid into their deck, but also Lightning Bolt, citing not only that I was defending against one piece of removal, but they wanted to see more of it to put the deck away. It is not an accident that that player, upon making this decision to add more more combat tricks, more interaction, and more removal, found themselves also winning more games as they expanded that idea broadly against their other opponents and in their broader deck construction. Glissa still folds to the Path of Exile, a Braid, Kenrith's transformation is particularly damning, and many more that populate the precons inexperienced commander players are using as a base. This list has 6 ways to protect Glissa, and over a dozen if you count the Acidic Slime, Reclamation Sage, and Terra Sunders that will clean up any enchantment-based effects such as pacifism. Part of the reason you do this as well is that if you are using this deck list to teach your commander group that they should be running more interaction, they start to create more interaction in their deck because they know not only do you have a very relevant commander that will play board police, as we'll get into for the next section, but they also recognize that the protection that you have is both a combat trick and something that makes it difficult for them to put up with your normal state-based effects and your normal actions of swinging as your commander. In fact, both of these things are to your benefit. If you are playing this as a teacher to improve the quality of your commander games and improve the play level of your normal group inside of your LGS, you should celebrate when they manage to overcome some of these protections. Otherwise, don't get rid of them unless you have a very good reason. Precise removal. Longstalk Brawl? Duel for Dominance? Breathe your last? And Abrupt Decay. Okay, whew, thank goodness. Excluding Glissa, there are 20 removal effects in this deck. This makes you the person with the most single target removal in the pod. Hence, a Tactician's deck. While many of them use the fight mechanic, the remaining are for those circumstances where Glissa is unavailable. A quick word to anyone who is not familiar with this, fight does work for Death Touch, but does not work for First Strike. That is to say, Glissa plus fight does not mean that she deals her Death Touch damage before the opponent, they rather deal damage at the same time. You can look that up if you don't believe me. All that is to say is that, at the very least, you can 1-for-1 anything, and Glissa's 3/3 body, especially with any stray counters getting on it, is big enough that you will find her doing quite a bit more than just that. The remainder that don't use the fight mechanic are when Glissa is unavailable. You have more than 3 other players combined, so don't let the removal go to your head. Be judicious, follow the game plan, and remember, you're the board police, not the board dictator. Commander is a game about people first and magic second, aka politics. If you're making everybody's life miserable, you'll get swung out of the game. Fight spells are often simple. Cast them, target Glissa and the opponent's creature, and win the combat. Obviously pay attention and think carefully about it if your opponent's creature is that much bigger, but you'll know when the appropriate targets wield themselves. Having Legolas, Master Archer in play will change the targeting of fight spells. In the event that Glissa is taking a nap in the command zone or is blocked off by a Draenith Magistrate, the plethora of Death Touch creatures ensure the fighting continues. Look to Ophiomancer's Snakes, Acidic Slime, Isareth the Awakener, Gonti Lord of Luxury, and Evolved Sleeper to go ahead and pull the duty when Glissa can't or won't. Muvon Volley Beast Tracker, highly underrated card for this deck, by the way, super good. Grabs 9 of the deck's other 26 creatures for this purpose. Finally, Deathbringer Regent is a reset against Legion of Doom decks and loves seeing a Grim Haruspex or a Namada Primeval Warden in play. Accursed Marauder is just a fantastic early game board wipe against pods with lower CMC commanders, but make sure you're not aiding a Jared Carthalion or a Tevesh Zat Doom of Fools by helping them out with removal. Take care before dishing out Abrupt Decay, Beast Within, and Putrefy, as Glissa can struggle with troublesome artifacts. Cast sorcery speed removal like Fell and Longstock Brawl early and often. Getting out Glissa Sunslayer on turn 2 is great if you can manage it, but dropping her turn 3 with interactions such as Tail Swipe and Blossoming in defense is a more common result. Cards such as Devoted Druid were cut to make room for Lead and Mirror for exactly this reason. The artifact dork you can play beats dorks that occasionally get hosed searching for your missing color. The budget mana dorks are on full display here and get incidental benefit from Glissa being an elf through the Path of Ancestry that is also in the deck. If you're reading this guide to learn more about Commander fundamentals on a budget, play a few games before cutting out these mana makers. You'll be pleased with the results. For more experienced players, the choice to include Explore over Rampant Growth is to favor the card draw need to keep up pressure, and 3 visits just wasn't in the bulk pile, by the way. Cultivate and Harrow are the same CMC as Glissa, making them too slow to forward the game plan. Final thoughts and budget inclusions. Massacre Girl, Feed the Swarm, Pick Your Poison, Fog. As I said in the introduction, this list was generated using bulk commons, uncommons, and rares from my local game store as a self-imposed challenge. I would have added a Massacre Girl if I found it, and the same for other budget overperformers such as Okame Adversary, Pick Your Poison, Rancor, Feed the Swarm, and maybe Decree of Pain. I encourage anyone who found this interesting to take up making their own $35 commander. It was a fun exercise, and I've learned a lot about deck construction, play patterns, and threat evaluation in the process. Obviously, follow me on Twitter or YouTube if you want to see more in the future. And as a final send-off, I will say, one of the biggest benefits that I've ever had to using this is that I was able to go ahead and teach other people how to play Magic the Gathering and Commander by running more interaction, by caring a lot more about what their opponents were doing, about playing removal themselves. And I think all of these are an extra benefit and a greater add-on. And I saw as I was playing this that a lot of people focused their decks, tuned them to make them a little bit faster, made sure there was more removal to put aside Glissa and stop her shenanigans early, and themselves ran more interaction, maybe not the 20 that are in this deck, all for the purpose of getting actionable extra value. I also found an interesting side effect of making this deck list, putting it together and playing many games across many local game stores with it, is that I found people weren't complaining nearly as much about budget and nearly as much about proxying. This is one of the benefits of playing this deck if you are a stronger player, is that when you tell people the low cost of the deck and you show that it is in fact just a random mismatch of things you've had as opposed to the carefully honed and curated brew that you might otherwise create on a website such as EDH Rec, they tend to be a little less suspicious of your play and look a bit more inward to see if there's anything they can do to play Commander a little bit better. And with that, everyone, thank you so much for showing up for the stream. I'm going to cut out that little section in the middle, post this up to YouTube, and I hope you get to play this soon as well. Again, link will be in the description, and bye.